Martinsville Speedway has been on the NASCAR Cup Series schedule ever since its inaugural season in 1949. This track is a fan favorite for many, and I personally have it as my second favorite track right after Bristol. Martinsville Speedway is typically thought of as a track where all the drivers are beating and banging, tempers are going to flare. Maybe a guy that you took out on lap 50 just to make up a few spots will come back to bite you and in return dump you on lap 300 or however many laps after, just because you sent him up a bit too high into the groove, and so he scraped the wall and his day effectively got ruined. And although it takes a lot of driver skill, of course, to master the paperclip, there's also a certain element of luck in just being able to finish a Martinsville race, let alone getting into the top 5 or top 10 or even winning. It's almost like Daytona or Talladega in a sense that you definitely need lady luck on your side to have a good day at Martinsville. Despite all of this, throughout all of the years Martinsville has been on the NASCAR Cup Series schedule, there hasn't been a single driver to master this half-mile paperclip better than anybody except for Jeff Gordon. Gordon is easily the best driver at Martinsville in the modern era, even if you take into account how many more wins Richard Petty has, or that Jimmy Johnson has the same amount of wins. I still believe that Jeff Gordon is the best driver at Martinsville in NASCAR Cup Series history. And I'll show you why. In 47 starts at Martinsville, Jeff Gordon had 9 wins, which is a percentage of 19.1%, which basically means that for every 5 races, Jeff Gordon would win at least 1 race. And he had 29 top 5s, which is 61.7% of all his races. So almost 2 out of every 3 races, Jeff Gordon would finish in the top 5. Then he would have 38 top 10s, which is 80.9% of all the races that he drove at Martinsville. So 4 out of 5 races, Jeff Gordon would finish in the top 10 at Martinsville, which is simply insane to me. He also finished 99.5% of all laps, and in only one race did he really go like over 100 laps down and have a really bad day. That was in 1994 when I believe he was involved in a crash. So something that's mainly attributed to just, lady luck not being on his side that day. And still, Jeff Gordon had an average finish of 6.7 at Martinsville. At a track where luck can make or break your day, he had an average finish of 6.7 over 47 different races. And even crazier was that he had 0 DNFs. 0. Some people don't even have 0 DNFs in an entire season, and Jeff Gordon didn't have one at 47 races over all of his career at just Martinsville Speedway. That is simply incredible. Those are just the stats that Jeff Gordon has set in stone, They're set in stone in the NASCAR history book. You can't really change them since what happened in the past is what happened in the past. But if you take a look at what happened and, you adjust some incidents, what happened in the past for, to count for bad luck or whatnot, his stats just get even crazier. In the 2007 spring race, he and Jimmy Johnson had an iconic duel at the end of the race that ended with Jeff Gordon just missing out on the win with a photo finish at the line. And if you ask me, I believe that if Jeff Gordon just raced Jimmy a little bit harder, a little bit less clean, maybe give him a bit bigger of a bump in the final corners, he could have edged out Jimmy Johnson for the win. Or if there was just maybe one more lap, maybe he could have gotten past him cleanly and, he would have gotten his 10th Martinsville grandfather clock. Well, assuming he wins that race. And then in 2012, he and Jimmy Johnson were set up for another epic rematch of that 2007 spring race when David Rudiman stopped on the track instead of going down the pit road with a 0 IQ move right there, to me at least, which ended up resulting in a restart where Ryan Newman ran into the back of Clint Bowyer, which made Clint Bowyer absolutely send it down the inside of Jeff Gordon and Jimmy Johnson, which absolutely ruined their day and what could have been a fight for Hendrick Motorsports' 200th win. And that also, ended up coming back to bite Clint Bowyer in the ass later that year, but it is what it is. And then in 2014, at the fall race, Jeff Gordon was leading late in the race before a caution came out, kind of screwed up the order and everything. And that allowed Dale Jr. to get by Jeff Gordon on the restart. And Tony Stewart, kind of held Jeff Gordon up with old tires. So that prevented Jeff Gordon from, just rocketing by both of them at the start. And Dale Jr. managed to fend off the master of Martinsville for long enough that he captured his first and only grandfather clock. And although it was nice to see Dale Jr. win, it's just insane to think about that Jeff Gordon could have possibly won his 11th grandfather clock at the time. And then finally, in 2015, we have the spring race where Jeff Gordon was leading pretty late in the race before, he got a speeding penalty that ended up relegating him to only finishing in the top 10, which is still a good result, but, it kind of screwed him out of the win that day, and Denny Hamlin ended up, dominating the end of the race to win. But, maybe if he didn't get that speeding penalty, just maybe Jeff Gordon would have been able to eke out a victory and get his 12th grandfather clock at the time, and it also would have been his second Martinsville win in a row if he had also managed to win the race before that in 2014 at Martinsville. And taking all these hypotheticals into account, if Jeff Gordon managed to get all 4 of these extra wins, his stats would now become this: 13 wins in 47 races, which is a percentage of 27.6%, which is a improvement from 19.1% with the actual stats. And now that would mean basically out of every one of 4 races Jeff Gordon would have won, then he would have 31 top 5s versus only 29, which is now a percentage of 65.9% compared to 61.7% before. And it's still about a rate of every 2 out of 3 races he would finish in the top 5. And then he now has 39 top 10s versus just 38. And it is now a percentage of 82.9% versus 80.9% before. And it's still about every 4 out of 5 races Jeff Gordon would have finished in the top 10. This would have also changed his average finish from being a 6.7, which is basically a 7 average finish at Martinsville, to being a 6.3. So it would go from basically being a 7 to a 6, which is absolutely insane to average at a place like Martinsville, where getting bumped out of the turn in 1 lap could ruin your race for the next about 200 laps or so. Or maybe it'll even end your day completely, and you won't even be able to finish the race. And also, Jeff Gordon's rather streaky at Martinsville. 6 out of his 9 wins came consecutively. 1996 fall and 1997 spring came consecutively, and then he swept both 2003 and 2005 in terms of Martinsville races. And from 2003 to 2010, he had 15 straight races where he finished in the top 10, and then it was ended when in the fall race of 2010 he finished 20th after having an incident. And then from 2005 to 2010, he also had 11 straight top 5 races, which is simply insane to think about, especially considering just how, luck-based Martinsville is. And though it's obviously a track where you need a lot of skill, there's also a pretty big element of luck, not being taken out at the start, or not just having a car that won't be able to hook the bottom line and, get those launches out of the corner that you need to be successful at in Martinsville. And now I'd like to talk about what could perhaps be described as Jeff Gordon's best moment at Martinsville, even eclipsing his final win there. Because in 2005 in the spring race, he managed to come back from 3 laps down in that race to win it all. And the even sweeter part about this is that he managed to unlap himself twice, and he only had to use the lucky dog once. And that was, I believe, to get back on the lead lap. So Jeff Gordon not just had a car that was absolutely on rails that race, and he also was able to use his driver skill to unlap himself twice at a place like Martinsville, where it's very close and tight, and not a place that drivers who might be afraid of small spaces would like to be, considering just how tight everything is and how little margin of error there is. Jeff Gordon managed to come back from 3 laps down, and he still won the race. I'm sure you could argue that because it's such a short track that it would probably be easier to come back from 3 laps down. It's still an impressive feat to me, at least. And while I would rank this win over his final win in the Cup Series, that one was kind of handed to him on a silver platter by Matt Kenseth, with one of the more iconic feuds in NASCAR history, with him taking out Joey Logano. Joey Logano was absolutely on rails that day. I don't think anybody would have managed to catch up to him, not even Jeff Gordon, who's arguably the master of Martinsville. And yeah, that's why I rank his 2005 win as the best Martinsville win career, and possibly the best win of his career, just because he really displayed his skill and absolute mastery of Martinsville to just come out on top. And then there's also the fact that in 2004, while he was in the top 10 and I believe in contention for the win, the track basically vomited up part of itself at Jeff Gordon's car, which he still finished in the top 10, but it obviously took him back from probably winning to finishing in just the top 10, which is something insane to think about. That track literally just told him, no, I don't want you to win. I'm literally just going to throw myself at you so you don't win. That's just that's something funny I think about sometimes. And then a couple years ago, Jeff Gordon talked about perhaps running a truck series race at Martinsville, which I think it would be an absolute cherry on top to see Jeff Gordon run just one final race at Martinsville to put in this storybook ending to, a absolutely legendary NASCAR career. So thank you guys for watching and listening to me ramble on and on about Jeff Gordon. And I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll catch you later.